my colleague Isaac Bernal, and we're here to present Group A's solution to the challenge of climate change, an energy miracle, the consensus. And we'd like to start with a little quote.
In short, we need an energy miracle. Time is not on our side. Every day we are releasing more and more CO2 into our atmosphere and making our climate change problem even worse.
We need a massive amount of research into thousands of new ideas, even ones that might sound a little crazy. We felt like this was an appropriate way to start off because in order to achieve our climate change vision, we may have to take some pretty unconventional measures. Our overall vision is to develop a consensus-based roadmap for capping global temperature increase at 2 degrees Celsius while meeting the needs of a global population that will continue to grow. And our policy agenda has 3 central components. First, implementing a carbon price system which will generate revenue that we hope to reallocate to fund sustainable energy initiatives, compensate the fossil fuel industry for disruption, and provide rebates to the general public. An important secondary benefit of the carbon price system is it creates a market to trade carbon offsets and pollution credits. The second component is to maximize subsidies for 3 critical areas: renewable energy, nuclear energy, and innovative new technologies for clean energy. And the third component is really to trigger an agricultural revolution. We hope to facilitate a more sustainable land use policy and agricultural production methods that in the long term can reduce non-CO2 greenhouse gas emissions by 80%. This will contribute to the global general welfare, but it will require significant efforts to change both patterns of consumption and land use. We project several long-term outcomes. First, a significant decrease in the overall cost of energy over the time period. This will really begin as some of the implementation fully ramps up, which is something that Isaac will discuss in greater detail. But as you can see, for the majority of the world's population, energy should become much more affordable over the next about 80 years. The next is to ensure adequate resources for a growing population. One of the challenges of our model are the demands to really reduce particularly methane gas in the agricultural sector. However, from the perspective of sustaining a growing population, this is actually an advantage because one of the main drivers of methane is animal husbandry, raising cattle, raising pork, or raising pigs for pork. And so by shifting that production into less resource intensive and less greenhouse gas generating plant-based agriculture, we can both generate more food and reduce the reduce the impact on climate change of this sort of shift. We also hope to offset many of the major negative externalities associated with climate change beyond the 2-degree barrier, as well including weather impacts and severe droughts, as well as achieving positive public health and pollution outcomes because we would reduce the production of greenhouse gases.
Thank you, Harrison. So one of the next things we want to discuss is how the policy package works. First, we need to go over the lessons that we learned. One of the first things that as a team we were able to come to the conclusion was compromise is necessary for success. As we have seen through historical measures such as the past G20 summits, the Kyoto protocols, oftentimes the conclusion was not available because compromise was not able to be made. Thus, we need to create cross-sector teams. It's not adequate that the carbon pricing sector is independent of the sustainable energy, of new energy, of the fossil fuel sectors. Rather, by having cross-sector teams working together, we're able to maintain and hold a compromise where solutions are possible. Next, we also had to remain cognizant of how to help other industries succeed. It's not about meeting our bottom line alone. It is about helping other industries also meet their bottom lines, appease their stakeholders, and work as a cross-sectional team to reach those compromises. Next, we focused on reducing emissions and increasing clean energy. There is a truth that a lot of people don't like to acknowledge, and that is sustainability has a high energy level cost. By increasing, by working together, we are able to help offset a lot of those costs for the individual sectors and able to work to make our package effective and able to reach the goals that we have set for ourselves. But we, in this program and in this simulation today, we use the stakeholder-based model. So what are the strengths of a stakeholder-based model? They are as follows. We were able to achieve buy-in from all the sectors. If we were working independently, we would not have been able to get the compromise and the cross-sectional communication that allowed us to maintain and come up with a package that where we were able to reach the goal of limiting climate change at 2 degrees Celsius. Furthermore, all sectors using this model were able to make concessions. By actually seeing it in front of us and were able to run the models, we were able to note who had the ability to concede which resources, who was able to increase taxes, who was able to have more subsidies, and who was able to benefit and slash have some of the tolerable losses. This allowed us to have rigorous modeling where we were able to test and prove each step, every step of the way that allowed our program, our project to work. This also allowed us to prioritize levers based on relevancy. Using this modeling system, we were able to note which levers actually didn't have as much of an impact on the overall picture. As such, we were then able to focus on the sectors who were able to make a bigger impact and work on helping them be sustainable and lower the losses that they would make. But this modeling system also offered some unique opportunities that we definitely capitalized off of. Some of them were that, by looking at the modeling system, we were able to see that solutions are possible outside of the model itself, such as the cap and trade system, which was not identified in this. By identifying and following through with those external opportunities that exist outside the model, we were able to strengthen our argument, strengthen the package, able to call upon the creativity, the ingenuity, and the collaboration of our team to create a sustainable package, create a sustainable vision, create a sustainable roadmap. Thus, we found room for clarification. We found the areas that we can improve and we could be made sustainable. But of course, we also had to all consider our bottom lines. How do we support those stakeholders? First, the fossil fuel industry. Even though they did increase some of their taxes, we reallocated some of the revenue to help them because they were absorbing a large part of the cost. Second, as Harrison went over, we created a revolution in the land agriculture industry. This revolution was able to be made because we were able to think of models and solutions outside of the simulation that was able to prop them up and absorb a lot of the loss that they might have made and actually make it sustainable. Next, we took into consideration governments and how that would affect the model. By having a cross-sectional team collaboration, we were able to address these problems and decide on how this was going to actually help our cause instead of harming it. Thus, we have to come up with a timeline, naturally. Between 2016 and 2019, one of the big things that we need to do is create a staffing system. As our team worked, this will allow us to set up an infrastructure that would make our plan more sustainable in the long run. Next, the fossil fuel industry was able to give the acceleration of coal plant retirement at 10% per year. Implement loss aversion policies will also be put into place. This will make the revolutionization of the agriculture and land use much more sustainable and able to be profitable actually in the end. Next, we will continue with implementing our vision plan. Through the implementation, we'll be able to see how we can continue with this roadmap, make adjustments as needed, and continue to hit our goal to make sure that climate change does not increase more than 2 degrees Celsius by the year that we are marked. Thus, subsidies will also be taking effect. This will help with the transition for a lot of the industries, as well as for some of the costs that they may absorb. Fossil fuels will also start to take effect, which will allow us to have more revenue, which will be able to sustain the plan. And thus, in 2020, carbon pricing will take effect, will increase revenues even further, and will allow us to continue to create and maintain the sustainable climate change plan. As you can see through this timeline, all the fossil fuel industry emissions are going to go down, as well as the renewable industry is going to increase. And with that, we thank you for your time.
And we're excited to take your questions. Yes?
What was your overall feasibility score?
Our overall feasibility score.
8.3. So this shows that we did have a lot of buy-in, and the governments and for-profit industry would be less opposed to the plans that we are implementing. You can see that we also had a relatively low stakeholder contentment value as well. That also adds back up to our plan. Hi, sorry, rather.
Yes?
So you put out some pretty vigorous and exciting proposals to both reduce coal, I think it was to use of coal to zero by 2040, and also you're fostering a revolution in agribusiness. So what's your plans for making this come to fruition? What are your ideas about how to do that?
So, as I mentioned, as we talk about agribusiness, I think it would be focused on both the production and consumption patterns. On the production side, the creation of a market for carbon creates opportunities for reforestation. That's one of the policies we mentioned, the idea of loss aversion, the idea that you can, which is something that's currently being used in the EU, so the idea that you essentially pay folks to keep their land not degraded. And by implementing that early in the process, I think you preserve existing levels of forestation. And then you can begin to expand from there. I also think that there could be options to look, to propose model national legislation on potential taxation of consumption, particularly of meat, since it's so resource intensive. There's also been good evidence from other industries of opportunities for scientific innovation in your sort of manufacturing and development processes that reduce particularly non-carbon or non-CO2 greenhouse gases. So I think seeing what of those could be transitioned into largely the industrialized process of meat production are all opportunities on the agribusiness side. I think on the sort of phasing out coal side, we partially try to balance that through reallocating money from the carbon tax or the carbon pricing model into that industry to compensate them for losses. There's also a staggering of the levels of taxation on other fossil fuels, essentially moving folks down the concentration gradient from coal, which is the dirtiest, down into oil and natural gas, which are progressively less dirty. And I think that helps to keep it feasible for the fossil fuel industry to achieve such dramatic progress on coal.
And to kind of piggyback off of what Harrison was saying, one of the benefits of having our tax on the CO2 per ton starts over in 2020 was that was going to give us almost immediate revenue, of which we would start being able to allocate back, so even to sustainable practices. This would help encourage the agriculture industry to make the changes that they need to help make our revolution that we are proposing here sustainable and applicable.
We had a start date of 2016. Considering that it's already almost March of 2016, does that seem a realistic date for the implementation of the policy?
I completely believe it does, because one of the lessons that we learned was that cross-sectional team compromise. A lot of the infrastructure has already been created by several other organizations. The EU is already participating in such a cap and trade system. California, a couple of states in the US, certain Canadian provinces are participating in a lot of these practices. But that's one of the main things that we wanted to start, and you remember our timeline, was that 2016 we were also going to start the staffing. I believe the infrastructure is there. It goes back to that one lesson that we learned today, which is compromise is needed, collaboration is needed, and cross-sectional communication. Through those three communication techniques, we believe the infrastructure is there. All we have to do is just take advantage of it.
And
to jump in and piggyback